Hungarian presidency of the Council of Europe has barely started, and Prime Minister Orban has already caused significant damage by exploiting and abusing the role of Council presidency. We've been praising him here on the Muckrakers as Orban the Awesome. He seems to be meeting all sides to try and find peace. Why do you think they got it in for him, Taylor?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I just want to go back to a point that James had made referring to Trump, and that is I was very surprised to see that on Twitter, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson had met with Trump recently. They posted a photo to social media in which Boris Johnson said it was great to meet with Trump. He is also dedicated to supporting Ukraine and helping Ukraine and aiding the country. So that was quite interesting to see, given that Trump has stated that he will seek to end the conflict in the region. But anyways, back to your question, Andrew. Yes, this letter, I must say, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I was somewhat surprised by it because I felt that perhaps politically, or at least through a PR perspective, it would be bad optics to come out against a leader who was on a peace mission. But of course, they destroyed my expectations here, and they are totally going after Orban. And this letter was signed by 93 MEPs. All of their names are available. I did briefly look at that list to see if there's anybody that stood out to me, and I didn't see anything that was, or any individual that shocked me who was a part of this plan here. But I think that it's so interesting. If you look at the text of this letter, they openly admit that they are not wanting to advocate for any peace at all. They actually said, and this is a quote from the letter, it says that Orban is actively undermining the common EU positions, for example, by pushing for a ceasefire at any cost instead of a ceasefire on Ukraine's terms. I mean, that statement right there just should tell anybody that they're not serious at all about seeking peace, achieving peace, because Zelensky's plan is quite unrealistic. Russia said that they will not accept it. Part of that plan is the full withdrawal of Russian troops from regions of Ukraine, which Russia has claimed as its own. They also are seeking reparations, as well as an international war crime tribunal against Russia. And they want Russia to agree to all of that. That's the Ukrainian plan, or at least part of it. It's unrealistic. And again, this just goes to show that peace and seeking an end to this conflict is in no way the goal of the EU establishment. And unfortunately, Orban's efforts seem to not be quite successful.
Yeah, and it's more than that, isn't it? Because it's very worrying when they say he's actively pursuing a policy agenda which is contrary to common EU positions. Because Orban, as we say, seems to be talking to everybody, trying to find a road to peace, which we absolutely applaud. And what I always say here on the Muckrakers is we're not taking sides. We are pro-peace rather than pro any particular side. It's horrendous on both sides. What's your take on that, James?
Yeah, like I said, I think, the EU is a bureaucratic institution. It runs by rules. And I think, to play devil's advocate, I think, look, the EU politics before the EU, with all of the countries, there was always infighting. Every country having a different view and trying to get lots of playing for political positions. What the EU has done is try to unite European countries, particularly on foreign policy. And let's be honest, you can't have a small country like Hungary coming in the EU presidency and then suddenly just setting its own agenda and giving the impression that that is the EU's official position. So even if MEPs there might be some MEPs open to a peace talks and a deal. What they don't want is Hungary just taking over things and kind of setting the terms according to their own agenda. I think that would cause absolute chaos in the parliament and across Europe, to be honest with you, if Hungary was allowed to get away with that. So, like I said, I'll go back to my original comment. I think, the stance on this, this letter and why so many MEPs have voted to condemn Viktor Orban is probably just as much about European politics of the parliament and EU bureaucracy as it is actually about anything to do with the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the calls they make in this letter is they want Hungary stripped of voting rights. Now, what on earth happened to democracy? How on earth can they do that, Taylor?
Right, exactly. You know, I do agree with James' point here, because also outlined in this letter, they make several references to there being a lack of cohesiveness, and that this gives an impression that there is a lack of unity within the EU by Orban sort of stepping out and trying to help negotiate or help advance a peace negotiation between these two countries. But Hungary is interesting and unique in the fact that there are ethnic Hungarians who are in Western Ukraine who just happen to be there because of the border being changed through the 20th century. And so you have ethnic Hungarians, Hungarian-speaking people who have Ukrainian passports who are having to die and fight in this conflict. So there's a special interest that Hungary has in wanting to put an end to this as well, especially given its geographical location. So I think that's some important context for people to also take into consideration, that there's a stake in this that Hungary has that maybe the other countries in Europe do not have.
Now,
I mean, Andrew, if I can just butt in, I mean, I totally agree with what Taylor said there. Hungary does have a chip in the game here. They are directly affected more than a lot of other European countries.
From national security to global corruption, this is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.